trauma happens too quickly, too fast, too soon. And healing happens slowly over time and consistently. So if you come out of surgery, like they will give you medication to stop the shaking. And that's shutting down your body's natural response to shake and like discharge all of those hormones that need to happen so it doesn't become trauma.
I think sometimes I cry because I need to let it out. Like everything just like kind of boils up and then I just cry.
How do we work on interrupting that process so that there's safety for you to release maybe a little bit of it before it becomes an erupting volcano and you like have to let yourself release it? Your past doesn't have to define your present or your future.
Yeah.
And I'm like a walking, living, breathing testament of that. You can feel safe.
Hello, my loves. Welcome back to Better Than Before. Today, I have the honor of sitting down with Ali Cates, a trauma recovery coach and somatic experience practitioner who has helped countless individuals break free from the cycle of unresolved trauma and chronic pain. As the founder of the Somatic Healing Method, Ali is on a mission to empower people to heal from the inside out. Through her coaching and transformative retreats, Ali creates a safe space for deep healing and self-discovery. I can't wait to dive into her story and learn more about her approach to a mind-body healing. Ali, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited. So Ali and I met at a like a mastermind that we're doing, and we connected like right away. And when I started learning about her and what she does, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna need you on the podcast because I have recently found out what somatic healing was and everything, and I wanted someone to come on and kind of like lay it all down for us to explain what it is, how it helps. And so I guess we could just like dive right in. If you want to, why don't we start with your journey and then like how you got into it and then what it is, and we'll just take it from there.
Okay, awesome. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and talk to your community.
Oh, thank you.
So how I got into this was like really out of my own pain and kind of struggle that I went through. So my husband and I lost 7 people in 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
And we initially lost 3 people in 9.5 months when I was 22 years old. So it was like back to back and it was good friends. And going to these funerals, it just started like these back to back funerals brought up all of this pain and childhood trauma that I had like shoved down, didn't even remember. And I just remember like going on this healing quest, and kind of prior to this in like adolescence and in like elementary school, I had gone to like counselors because I had like this wild anxiety from the childhood trauma that I couldn't remember.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And say it again.
I said, oh, wow. Like this is all fascinating to me.
It's so fascinating. So I went on this healing quest because I was like, I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. Like I couldn't describe this feeling of what was happening inside of me. So I tried kind of everything under the sun when you think about like mental health, like regular talk therapy, CBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, neuroplasticity, or like the brain rewiring, you know, all of these kinds of things, and nothing seemed to move the needle for me until I found a practitioner that was doing somatic healing and like actually working with my body to move the trauma through my body, because trauma is held in your body, not your brain. Right. So kind of fast forward, I'm like in intense trauma recovery for about 3.5 years, and it's 3 weeks before my husband and I get married, and I get diagnosed with late stage Lyme disease and like multiple autoimmune conditions.
Wow.
Which is insane. So it like turned my world upside down.
I can't imagine 3 weeks before your wedding and you get this news and it's just like, what?
It was insane. I was like so dissociative because you have to be just to like kind of get through
you know,
you're like planning this big wedding and yeah. And then we come back from our honeymoon and I sit in an IV room for 9.5 months, 6 to 8 hours a day, like crazy, trying everything under the sun.
Wow.
Almost die of sepsis, like wild journey. And it's in that IV room that I like hear a lot of people, because I have a lot of time to like listen. And I hear so many people and what they're going through and what they've been through in their life. And I at least knew a little bit about like how when you have repressed trauma, it shows up and manifests physically. And I was having a physical experience of that. And so I was like, wow, I really want a place where people can come together and like heal and try to figure this out. And so I built my business out of that IV room. And the initial idea was to do retreats, but obviously COVID hit and everything pivoted. And so I moved into coaching and the somatic experience, and now I'm here.
That's crazy. That is insane. And I heard a little bit of your story. And so I want to try not to miss like the important parts because I kind of know it, but it's insane to me how you took like a negative, let's just call it a negative, you being in the hospital room and you're like, wait, how can I help other people? And I'm like, that is such a selfless thing. I feel like,
Mhm.
because I mean, for me, if I'm in an emergency room or I'm in a room like fighting for my life, I don't think my first thought is like, how can I help others? You know what I mean? So I just want to
Yeah.
like make that point, because that just kind of shows what kind of person you are. And we only met like last month or month and a half or however it's been, but
Yeah.
you can already tell like you're very selfless, and you want to
Mhm.
help, like anything you can do to help. And I think that's just, I wanted to call that out. But um
Thank you.
so then the retreats was the initial idea, and then you kind of led into you said the one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, I became a trauma informed coach. And then I was like, I need more experience or like more understanding behind this, besides just my own experience. So then I did the 3 year long somatic experience practitioner training under Peter Levine.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been incredible. The work has been incredible.
And so can you elaborate a little bit on like what somatic healing actually is? Because,
Yeah.
people can be like, oh, that's so woo woo, like it's whatever.
Yeah.
Can you just, and like in layman's terms, like make it as
Easy
easy,
as
it's
possible.
digestible. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I get it. That's like my favorite thing to do. I try to like not get too heady because I'll like nerd out and then I'm like, wait, no one
No
understands
one
this. Back
understands
it
what you're
up.
talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So somatic, like soma, the root of it, it just means body. And
Okay.
people have like kind of taken this to like extremes on Instagram. Like everyone thinks they're some type of somatic healing thing because they do something with the body, and it's not true. But that's another conversation for a
Yeah.
different day. But essentially, somatic healing is being able to process the trauma and like being able to process what happened to you in the traumatic moment, right? So when an experience is happening to you before it becomes trauma, there's all these hormones, there's all this stuff that happens in your body. When we don't process it is when it becomes trauma. So when we cut it off, when we dissociate, when we shut it down is when it turns into trauma and becomes things.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so, sorry, I want to ask before like we move on, because then I'll forget. So
Yeah.
how does one stop it? I feel like it's not like I mean, it could be like, I don't want to think about it, but I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes you don't really, or I don't have a say in something. To me, like, how do I not process it? You know what I mean? You would
Yeah.
think that it
Yeah.
would just process automatically.
So I think let me give you kind of an example because I feel like for anyone that's like
Yes.
visual, this is like what somatic experiencing is. So I'm going to give you kind of like a visual on it, and then I'll give you an imagery kind of example of it. And when I break this down, people are like, oh, it clicks.
Okay.
But so this gentleman, Peter Levine, who I studied under, he was a psychotherapist, and he was how come people are traumatized? Like what actually happens in your body and your physiology that like makes an experience become trauma? And what he did is he went out and he studied animals out in the wild because he was like interested in why prey are not traumatized. Like, how come a little bunny rabbit that's being like, is prey and like should be looking for a predator all the time? How come they're not hyper vigilant?
Right.
And what he found is that they complete a stress response cycle. So imagine a circle. At the top, you have the trigger, then you go into fight or flight, then you go into discharge, and then you go into rest and digest. So parasympathetic. This
Yep.
is what everyone's talking about right now,
Yeah.
right? Most humans go from being triggered to fight. They go from being, triggered to fight or flight, triggered to flight or flight, and they build this emotional charge,
That's
right?
me.
They don't have that discharge. So,
What's discharge? Sorry. Like it kind of like a
yeah,
release, or like
yeah,
okay.
I'm going to go into, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So, you're a mom, like you've had a baby, right? Like when you've had a baby, you shake, like, or when you've come out of surgery, you shake,
Which
right?
I had no idea. It was insane. I
Exactly.
was like, I'm shaking, and I'm not doing anything. Like
Totally.
that's
Right.
okay. Okay.
So, that's a discharge.
Okay.
And the medical world is like not equipped for trauma recovery because they're just equipped to take care of what's happening in the moment. So if you come out of surgery, like they will give you medication to stop the shaking. And that's shutting down your body's natural response to shake and like discharge all of those hormones that need to happen so it doesn't become trauma, right?
Oh.
So if that actually happens, if you actually discharge that pain, then you'll move into the rest and digest, and you'll have less, like the goal is obviously to not have the trauma imprint in your body, right? Or to have less of it.
Wow.
But we shut it down. Like how many times have you like cried? I mean, had the experience right before this, right?
Yeah.
Like you're crying, you shut it down, you move on. You know
Like we
what I
gotta
mean?
keep
Like
going. We can't.
you're like, okay, we're gonna shut it down, right?
Okay. Okay.
But even I feel like with those experiences, it's like giving yourself the time and space to feel the emotion when it's happening,
But it's not
right?
always going to be a shake.
It's not always going to be a shake. It can be different things. So let's go with the bunny rabbit out in the wild
Okay.
example,
Okay.
right? So the bunny rabbit's like munching on some grass. I imagine it's in like a pretty meadow, munching on some grass, looks over its right hand shoulder, sees a coyote, it gets triggered, goes into fight or flight, starts running. It's running, running, running. And then I imagine it has like a little, like, what's it called?
Yeah,
Tree
like
that's
a
fallen
rock
down,
or
little
like,
hole. It
yeah,
can, yeah,
yeah.
a little spot it can go in, and then it starts shaking or it starts doing all the things it needs to do, its body needs to do. Then it's going to come out of that little, bunny rabbit hole that it's in and then bounce off and then find a place to actually sleep, right? This is how they don't stay in that fight or flight, right? So for humans, I feel like if you are shutting down your emotions, the biggest thing to do is acknowledge it. Like right before this call, I had a moment where I was like, I just need to acknowledge this thing that's happening before we
Yeah.
jump on this call. Had my emotion, right? And then like obviously I might deal with that later tonight too,
Totally.
right? So it's like giving space to actually feel what you're feeling instead of just shoving it down and continuing to shove it down.
But I think, and you can totally say, Yami, you're being dumb. I just feel like sometimes if I'm crying, I'll cry. I'm a crier, so I will let
Yeah.
myself cry. But then what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, am I processing that, or I don't know. I don't even know the question. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think that there's so there can be what's called is an overcoupling is what we call it, which just essentially means that like your crying isn't actually giving you the cathartic release and discharge that you need it to do, that your body needs it to do. It's just become almost like a
like a
coping
part, right,
mechanism
right. And
that you're like,
so,
I'm gonna cry and continue to cry because I think it's actually helping.
yeah. And so, how do you find that then? Like, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I would recommend for you is like if do you notice that like when you start crying it's like okay, I can't stop and I'm like going for it or you feel like it's cathartic? Like what happens?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I
That's what I would be
honestly,
curious about. Is
yeah.
like what is the pattern that's happening?
I'm trying to think for the last time I cried. It must have been like yesterday. Well,
I should know this.
no, I think we're in a weird time to ask because we are moving in 3 days.
Totally.
So a lot of the crying has been about the move and the grieving of the house and stuff. So I don't know that, but I feel like sometimes I cry because I need to let it out. Like everything just like kind of boils up and then I just cry.
Yeah, totally. So what we would say like if in like the somatic space is like when you're working with someone who has this response where like it bubbles up and then they have to kind of give it out is like how do we work on interrupting that process so that there's safety for you to release maybe a little bit of it before it becomes an erupting volcano and you like have to let yourself release it,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So the whole point of somatic work is you want to take the fear that's happening in your body and let your like the whole point, and this is heady, right? Is you're trying to uncouple the fear from the physiology. So you're trying to take the fear out and then let your body do what it needs to
What it
do.
needs to do on its own instead of like us trying to, yeah, I know. I get that. I get that.
Because your brain is going to like try to keep you in a place of safety. So it's going to be like, don't cry yet, don't cry yet. And then your body's going to be like, I'm so overwhelmed. I have to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
Yeah.
so interesting. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. Okay. And so then I'm trying to see what way I want to go first. Like who would you recommend somatic healing to? Like obviously not everybody or everybody. I don't know.
You know, it's really interesting. I think if you talked to me before the pandemic, I would say like certain people with, if you're finding you're in a pattern of going to therapy and it not working or et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like almost after the pandemic, there's so much disconnection and so many people have learned how to like not learned but maybe their coping strategy is to dissociate or to scroll, which is a form of
Oh
dissociation
yeah.
and being in freeze. Like I think there's so much nervous system dysregulation in our world now,
Yeah.
that I think it doesn't hurt for people to try it. Like
Yeah.
if you have anxiety or you're in a scroll hole, which I feel like everyone
Everybody.
is, like
Yeah.
yeah, like it doesn't hurt because the point is to create that safety, those pockets of safety in your life, right? Which I think after the pandemic, I'm so curious what the mental health studies are going to be like
Yeah.
15 years from now,
Yeah. Yeah. And so what does like, is it base per session? Like, how does it work? I'm so like, it's like a yoga class. You go one-on-one.
Yeah. Do you mean like yeah, so it's like typically one-on-one work.
Yep.
People, there are practitioners that do like group stuff, but I like doing like one-on-one work
One-on-one.
because that's the most helpful, I find. Um, yeah, and it's like, how does the actual session work?
Yeah. And is it like by sessions? Do you do like packages? Like what would you
I
find is
personally
like
do
a,
packages. I
okay,
have other, colleagues that do by session. Just depends on, because I also integrate like the coaching piece of it, which I find is really helpful for people because people are so wanting to talk things out that
totally.
sometimes just doing the somatic work can almost spiral people out, I found.
Okay.
So I like to give people a little bit more support, and then we can always move into like just a somatic like package.
Okay.
But I like to blend the coaching and the somatic experiencing because I find that's where people get the most results because they like want to be like, oh, this thing was happening today. And then I interrupted that. And then I use some of the tools we've been working on. Right.
And so what does a somatic experience look like? Like what, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, but like, I'm just so curious what like a one-on-one session would look like if we were working on that.
Yeah, it's very different. And I think what's hard, and I know this sounds like kind of woo woo, but there isn't language for the body, right?
Okay.
Because we are constantly trying to create language to understand things. So, what an SE session looks like is, and everyone has a different way of explaining it,
Yeah.
but it looks like you and I are trying to find a pocket of safety in your body, which means like, where do you feel neutral? Where do you feel no anxiety in your body would be it, right?
We'd be looking for a long time.
Right. But so then that would tell me what kind of pattern your nervous system is in. And then we would be working on like creating more safety, building your window of tolerance, right? So it's hard to put into specific words, but I mean,
No, that was very helpful. That I
okay.
totally understood.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then what did you just say? You said putting what did you just, oh, dang it, you just said
Window of tolerance.
yes. Talk to me. What is that? Like how do you what is that?
Yeah. So, I mean, imagine like literally, the windows that you like push up.
Yeah.
I think those are called like casement windows or whatever.
Yeah.
So people's window of tolerance. So imagine the place that is like when you push up the window, that's actually where the air gets in. That like space.
Yep.
I'm gonna call it space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your window of tolerance. So when you go outside of that is when you have anxiety, depression, etc. It's when your nervous system is like there's a threat that's gonna happen. Most people are outside of their window of tolerance. They're overworking, they're overrun, they're over scrolling, they're over all the things, right? And sometimes people's window of tolerances can be really small. Like maybe the window is barely cracked, and it's hard for them to live inside of that window of tolerance because being outside of it feels safe, right? Another image I like to give is like of a water bottle. So this is your window of tolerance. Imagine there's a water bottle
Yep.
here. And if your bottle is filled to the top and I add one drop in, you're going to be overflowing.
Overflowing. Yeah.
But some people like the overflowing because it gives them the high and they're in this like sympathetic charge and that's
But
how they
that
get
would be
stuff
like
done.
their chaos. Like they're working in the chaos. Like we were
Yeah. And
yeah.
people love that. And I think as an entrepreneur, like you got to live there sometimes to like
Totally.
get shit done,
Totally. 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 But like when you're out of work, you shouldn't be like on fight or flight. Like no, I
Say
feel
it
like
again.
when you're not in that work zone, you should be able to get out of the fight or flight.
Yeah, but I think that's where the piece of it is like sometimes you get so attached to being in that space that then you're like, oh, I can't do anything unless I'm in
Yeah.
that sympathetic charge?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's
It's all about creating
crazy.
safety.
And so how do you create the safety? Oh,
You
and
have
then
to work.
wait,
Yeah.
with the window,
Yeah.
uh,
Analogy.
thank you. I'm like, what's the word? So is the goal to open up the window more to create more
Yes.
space? And then how does that happen? By creating by
Slowly.
oh my
Like
gosh.
watching paint dry. It happens slowly and over time. So healing happens. So trauma happens too quickly, too fast, too soon. And healing happens slowly over time and consistently. So people are like, "Oh, I want 10 sessions." And like I'm like, "Well, I don't know what your body is and I don't know if we can do
Right.
10 sessions. We can try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everyone's different, right? It could be like,
Everyone is so different.
yeah.
I have people come in that are like, and I also think that it does depend on how much safety they've had in their life. Like if they've been able to have pockets of safety before in their life versus people that haven't,
Right.
you know?
And when you say pockets of safety, you mean like literally, not like the body.
Like literally mind, body, and soul pockets of safety
Oh,
when you
okay.
like can actually be in that parasympathetic state in your life. So is it like, for me, it was like my grandma growing up was like my pocket of safety, right?
Got
Like
it.
she was my parent growing up. So that to me is like, okay, even though all this shit was happening in my life, there was a pocket of safety that I can like look at and
Kind
be
of
like,
go
okay, I
to.
have experienced what safety feels like before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people don't have that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. No, I can
Yeah.
imagine. I'm like, can we start a session now? Um, I'm sure you have, but I've been wanting to read that book, The Body Keeps the Score.
It's so good. It's really heady.
That's what I heard. That's why I haven't picked it up because I get nervous about it. I get like hard, like, am I gonna even understand it?
I would start with What Happened to You by Oprah and Bruce Perry
Oh
because
my
I feel
gosh.
like,
I'm literally having this. I had this exact conversation with my therapist that I was seeing for a little bit. And I
yeah,
said the same thing. And she literally said that one.
yeah, because that one to me is like really digestible. And I almost feel like I have Oprah's voice in my head when she's like,
I
and
started
it's like
reading it and I was like,
it,
this is insane.
yeah, it's like an interview kind of question. Did you read it?
I haven't finished it. I got into it
Oh,
and I was like, wait, my heart hurts for her. Like, I don't
yeah.
want to finish reading it. Like, I think I got one chapter in and I was like,
Uh,
girl, you good?
it gets so
Yeah.
good. Like it gets so much
Okay.
better. And he brings in like what happens with your body and your brain and how
Okay.
come talking about it doesn't work if you've had trauma. Like, I think that's a good kind of intro if you're
Okay.
like, okay, the body keeps the score is pretty heady.
Okay.
There's also The Secret Language of the Body by Carden and Jen Mann, who like Carden's like a colleague. And they're doing great work. And they talk about specifically like how your body with like autoimmune and disease and whatnot, how it shows
Mm,
up. So that one's a little bit more digestible too.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
thank you. I'm gonna
so
add
good.
those into it. What So, like, what advice would you give to somebody that doesn't really know? Let's just say someone doesn't necessarily like have something this huge moment of trauma, but like feels like they're in fight or flight 24/7. And maybe you could just educate me on this. Does it like you mentioned the doom scrolling. Would that be considered like a type of trauma that you're like so out of it that you're kind of like disassociating from real life? And then so you is that accurate or no?
Yeah, so I think it depends, like without getting too heady and like keeping it human, how I'm going to describe this. But when people are doom scrolling, it's typically because they're in a functional freeze.
Mm.
So there's like four types of trauma responses, right? There's like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which means like people please, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, fun
Okay.
fact. Yeah.
So maybe
Um,
that's where I land. Maybe.
yeah, that's where I live.
That's
And
funny.
sometimes people can have two responses. So sometimes people can have like a response on top of another one.
Oh,
So
so you can't like alternate from them? Like
you can,
okay, okay.
but typically you're going to have people show up like people are like, oh, I feel all of those. It's like, okay, well, typically you're going to have like kind of
A
your
stronger one.
go-to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like almost like what hand do you write with kind
Got
of,
it. Got
right?
it. Got it. Got it.
And that's from like learned experiences when there has been a situation that didn't feel safe. How did you respond to it?
Mm,
I think most people think like, okay, well, I didn't have any big T traumas. And when we think of big T traumas, which I kind of like hate talking about it this way, but I think it helps for people that like are just new to this world. But like if you have a big T trauma, you think of like sexual trauma, a car
right.
accident, death, etc., those kinds of things, right? Little T, you might think of like bullying or etc. Like, and to me, those feel the same because I've had
Hmm.
clients come in with a lot of little T traumas and
Yeah.
it sits in their body the same as a big T trauma,
Mm,
right? So I think when you're talking about like, I don't know if I have trauma, but like I feel like I'm in fight or flight, I would be like, okay, well, the thing that I love about somatic work is that we don't have to like name all of these things. We can
oh.
just work with like the body and the physiology. We
But
can
then
work
don't
with
you have
like,
to like name them to acknowledge them?
I mean, in like a psychotherapy setting, sure.
Okay.
But I think what's more empowering is that there's so many people that I see that are so brain oriented. They're like, I have developmental trauma and I have this and I have this. And I'm like, and that's not doing anything for you to name these things.
Mm,
What's actually going to move the needle? And I was there, so I can speak to this from
totally.
experience,
Totally.
right? Like, what is actually going to help you move the needle forward is being able to process it through your body and find safety and not feel like these things are looming over you and defining you,
Mm.
you know?
And so I know we touched on this a little bit, but when somebody processes it, that could be like actual tears, right? Like
Could be
crying,
actual tears.
shaking.
It could be a big sigh. It could be
Oh,
as small as like a big sigh, like not something that's forced, right? It's like
right, right.
any change in the system that's different is what we're like looking for.
That is so interesting. And
Hmm.
then I wanted to talk to you about the retreats. So you just did your first retreat, right? Which is
Yes,
so
yes.
exciting because it's been a dream
So
of
good.
yours for a long time and it looked amazing.
Thank
And it's
you.
only the beginning of, amazing things and I'm so
Yeah.
excited for you, but can you touch a little bit on um well, you touched why you want to do it, but like why now? Number 1.
Yeah.
I know you keep it fairly small
Yep.
and what are the plans? Like tell me about how the retreat went. Like let's catch up. Like I want to hear
Yeah.
everything.
So my original plan, like back in 2019, before the pandemic, was to have a retreat for people that are going through grief or just like feeling like their body's in fight or flight. Everyone was like, "What the hell is that?" And then
Right.
COVID hit, and people understood
You're
mental
like, "Oh,
health
I
now
get it
more.
now." Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was my original plan, and it has always been this piece on my heart because like I love events. That's what I was doing before I got sick. I went to school for like marketing and PR, so I love like putting on like some type of curated thing for people and having an experience. And I love healing and like I love what can happen when you actually feel that your past doesn't have to define your present and your future.
Love that.
So the retreat was great. It was my first group one. I had done like smaller ones for my individual clients before, but it was such a like I don't know. Have you ever had those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is happening? And like you're in the experience and you're also just so grateful that like you did it,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
totally.
know?
And you're kind of like not really in your body. You're kind of seeing it from the outside point of view and you're like, "Well, how did I get here? How is this happening?" But I'm so happy.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were moments of that. And then there were moments of like just being in the experience of like, oh, this is actually happening. So it was incredible. The women loved it.
Oh, good.
I really think that when we talk about somatic work, a lot of work takes people outside of their window of tolerance. And so my
Mm.
goal was to keep people inside of their window of tolerance. So I got a lot of feedback that they were like, this was the perfect pace and everything, which was
Oh,
great.
amazing.
It
And
was
so
incredible.
what does the retreat look like? So for those that are interested in the next one, let's talk a little bit about what they can expect.
Yeah, so it's a somatic healing retreat. So we get on Friday at like noon, leave Sunday at also noon. So 2 days, 3 nights, and it's focused on like how do you actually do this work in a sustainable way where you can like
Mm.
take some tools home and use them on your own, right? We had a private chef, we had a yoga therapist come in, like it was so good,
Oh,
so
that's
good.
so
I know
nice. I'm like,
it
can
was
we
so
go
great.
now? Like, I need a
Yeah,
weekend. I need a weekend. This is so great. I love this. I have so many questions though, like, and it can go so many different ways. If there's one thing you want somebody to know about somatic experience or healing, what
Mhm.
would that be?
Just that, like, I mean, this is my biggest thing that I always say is that you're like your past doesn't have to define your present or your future.
Yeah.
And I'm like a walking, living, breathing testament of that. That like you can feel safe and less anxious and like less depressed and less in fight or flight. Like
Mm.
that life is available to you.
That's so crazy because I feel like remember it slightly, right? And I don't know if working in social media has just made my fight or flight stay for good or what. Because
100%.
like I'm always on and like
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about it. But I wanted to share. I saw this. Let me see if I can find it really quick. I saw this, not a meme, like a graphic on Instagram, an informational thing, and I read it and I was like, "Holy shit, this was my childhood." Um, and it reminded me of, okay, here. Somebody asked, I just don't, oh, not, it's in quotations. I just don't get why I can't ever relax or even take a nap sometimes. And someone said, because your emotionally immature parent woke you up at 7 a.m., blasting the vacuum in anger. Because the moment you sat down to watch
Mm.
TV, you were shamed for being lazy and spoiled. Because if you didn't keep an ear open while you're doing your homework, you'd miss the garage door opening, the signal that it was time to brace yourself. Your
Mm.
body doesn't trust rest because rest used to mean getting caught off guard. Now, even
Mm.
if when no one is there to punish you, the tension and fear lingers in your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, that's it.
It
And I
makes me want
told,
to cry.
me
Yeah.
too. I cried while reading it because I remember, and this is like, I sometimes feel like some type of way sharing this because my parents did the best that they could.
Totally.
But like, I mean, this is why I am the way I am. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I wanna touch on it. Like with as much grace as possible, you know? And so
Mhm.
I was telling Taz that that's how it was for me. Like my mom would wake us up early in the morning to clean the house, and we weren't really like encouraged to chill or watch TV. And so I told him yesterday, and this I've never told him about this, and it just kind of came out. I was like, that's how I feel when I am in the room, in our home, like two adults, and I'm like laying in bed or something, and I'm just like
Mhm.
scrolling or on my phone or something, and I hear him coming. I like
Yeah.
perk up and I'm like, oh, I gotta pretend like I'm working or something. And he's like, wait, what? Because it's still like, and I know, like, I'm not perking up because it's him, but it's almost like my body just goes like, okay, I have to pretend like I'm
Well,
doing
that's
something.
like the hypervigilance, right? Like that's the pattern that your body. So I feel like the biggest thing with fight or flight trauma, however you want to put it, is like that's your body's response to an unhealthy situation. It's a
Yeah.
healthy response to an unhealthy situation, right? So you being like hyper vigilant is because you knew that in order to survive, and when we say survive, I think people think like life or death.
Like
It doesn't
actually
always
survive.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
like it can be different. Like for you to emotionally survive, you're a child. So when you look at your parent, they're the person that's taking care of you, however, the best that they did,
Yeah.
right? If they never work through their pain and they have this resentment or this anger or this trauma response that they've never worked through, it's going
Yeah.
to be passed down to their children,
Yeah.
right? So if they felt like they couldn't settle down, and also this is the thing, which I know you would know this because you're a mom, you have mirror neurons. So this is not woo woo. This is
This is
actual,
actual
like, you can look
fact.
this up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
actual medical research. So your child can feel you at 6 feet away. They mimic what you do, they know exactly how to show up with you, right? So when a parent is telling you, hey, this is wrong, hey, don't do this, the kid doesn't stop loving the parent, they stop
Mm.
loving themselves.
I actually just saw another thing about that. It's insane.
Yeah.
And it makes me so sad. And it like reinforces the I want to heal so
Hmm.
that Luna does not have to go through this, because I don't wish this upon anybody. And I am like, I understand that my case is like very like meh compared to
Yeah.
other things, but it's still, you know, it's my life and I'm definitely struggling. And
No,
I
but
would,
I don't think it's myrrh. I think it's like, I think a lot of people
I
are,
love how you said, I don't think it's myrrh.
it's not myrrh. Like,
I'm glad you caught
I think a
that.
lot of people are like trying to understand, why are they so tense? Why can't they relax when they get into bed? Why are they, you know, shaken out of bed when a door slams, right? And it's because like our bodies have this pattern of what used to happen. And that's what I mean when you create pockets of safety. Like in your life, if
Mm,
there was never a pocket of safety where you could rest,
mm.
that is going to be your pattern throughout your life.
Well, I guess we found it.
Yeah. You know? And I think that that's the thing is like, I mean, I could work on your nervous system and someone who you're like, oh my God, their life was, their story has been X, Y, and Z worse than mine. Your nervous systems can be very similar.
Totally. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there's a lot of shaming in like,
Oh yeah.
oh, well, my journey wasn't as bad. And it's like, okay, but
It's
it's
your
still what you're
journey.
going through and
Yeah.
it's valid.
Yeah. No, that's a good
Yeah.
reminder, because I feel sometimes like I don't want to take away from other people's experiences, but
You're
it's
not.
still like it's my experience. So yeah,
And
no, totally.
there's a range.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about trauma, it's like, okay, this person might be, I mean, when I talk to women that have been through like sexual trauma, it's like they're always comparing to the worst. And then it's
Mm,
like, then I have the worst cases and they're still comparing
and
to something 10 times worse.
yeah.
And you're like, when does this pattern end when people just realize like this is their
This
experience? But
right.
it's because we've been told like, it wasn't that bad.
That's
You're
true.
fine.
That's
Suck it
so
up.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Suck it up and keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so crazy. I feel like we can go down like it's just so big. You know what I mean?
So
Like
big.
it's
Yeah.
like it's insane. Okay, so we mentioned briefly that you're going to do more retreats, but is there anything on the horizon that you're excited to pursue, or anything you have coming out that we should be excited for you?
Yeah, I think just the retreats and I really want to get back into doing some type of events too, more just like
Mm.
more events around like mental health and healing and whatnot. So those are like my main goals right
If
now.
anyone wants like a joint, retreat with her and I, let me know. Cause
Oh
it
my God,
sounds like
yes!
that would be so fun, right?
That'd be
Like that'd be
so
so
fun.
fun.
Yes.
I'm just gonna put it out there. I'd be participating in all of your things. So like,
Oh my
I'm not,
God, no, we should do it
how fun
together.
would that be,
But
right?
so fun. And
Um,
you'll be close. We could do it in Arizona.
I know. Okay. And then we'll wrap with one thing. I do want to say I could talk to you about this for hours because I think it's
Mhm.
just so insightful. But I think this was a good like baseline educational, like introing people to somatic healing. And if we want, we can do a part 2 and get a little bit deeper. But
Love it.
to end on one more, what is one piece of advice or something that you have gone through or experienced that has made you better than before? I feel like I know the answer, but I'll let you.
Yeah. I think like the thing that's made me better than before is like everything that I've gone through.
Yeah.
There's actually this Stanford study, you can look it up, but they had people come in and write down the worst things that happened to them, like horrible things that happened to them. They wrote it down on the whiteboard and then they said, okay, here's an eraser. If you erase this, though, you will not have any of the lessons that you've learned from this horrible experience.
Oh, wow.
And no one erased anything. So there's horrible things, people losing their children, like
Right,
just
right.
awful things, right? And I feel that so deeply. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't publicly share about my life and just what I've been through.
Yeah.
But like, I really feel that, you know, I think we're all put here to do something with our lives.
Yeah.
And if that's like out of pain or out of, what we've been through, I think it's just so beautiful for me personally is that I've seen people that, their past hasn't defined their present and their future. And like I've also witnessed that for my own life. And that's, I think, what's made me better than before is just like really being able to see that like your past really does not have to define your present and your future. And you can live a new life.
Totally. And you're doing so much greatness from it. Like you're
Oh,
helping so
thank
many
you.
others through your experience. So from
Thank
your
you.
community and mine, we say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly, where can everybody find you and get more information about if they want to work with you or any of that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. So it's alikates.co. So ALIKATES.co. DM me, message me there. And then also my website is the same.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ali. Always so fun talking to you and learning from you. This was so great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thanks for
so
having
much.
me.
And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.